Alright, so today I want to show you the extreme variability of the Enchi ball python. The Enchi is a really popular gene. As a matter of fact, if you actually go over to morphmarket.com and look at all the Enchis over there, believe it or not, there's almost 25,000 Enchis and Enchi combinations over on morphmarket.com. It's really popular. And I'd say most people, when they think of Enchi, they're thinking of a pattern reducing gene. It can reduce the pattern. Some Enchis really reduce the pattern, and sometimes it reduces it a little bit. And what you may not know about Enchi is it also can significantly change the color of your single gene Enchis and of your combination. Some of the Enchis can be pretty orange, some of them can be pretty yellow, and some Enchis can look almost like a normal ball python where they really don't bring a lot of color into your combinations, which is pretty interesting. So today I want to jump over the internet and I want to show you the amazing variability of the Enchi ball python. Alright, so I'm going to jump over here on morphmarket.com and I want to start with this snake right here. This is one version of an Enchi ball python. And the first thing I really want to focus on is the differences in the pattern reduction with the Enchi. The Enchis can be really variable as far as reducing the pattern a lot, and sometimes it'll reduce the pattern just a little bit. As a matter of fact, I've actually seen some Enchis that almost look like normal ball pythons with just a little bit of pattern reduction. And every now and then you'll actually see one like this that has really strong tiger stripes in the pattern, which is kind of interesting. And there's another gene that's really similar to the Enchi, and that is the blade. And the blade is definitely different than the Enchi. As a matter of fact, it's not even allelic with the Enchi. So technically you could actually have a super Enchi, super blade combination, which is pretty interesting. And if you actually look at the blade just by itself, a lot of times the blade will have, I'd say more often, the blade will actually have more of a tiger stripe pattern, kind of like this, more than the Enchi. Sometimes you'll actually see the Enchis like this with really strong striping, like a tiger stripe pattern on the side of the Enchi. But the blade seems like, and just as a standalone gene, it's a little bit more frequent as far as getting tiger stripes on your blade ball python. So take a look at this. I actually pulled up another Enchi over here. If you look at the pattern on this one, it is completely different than the last one. This one is, you can definitely tell it's a reduced pattern compared to a normal, but you'll actually see there's not a whole lot of tiger striping on this one. It's kind of interesting. Sometimes you'll just have random kind of a random pattern reduction. I say this is probably your more typical Enchi type pattern as far as the standalone gene, but they can be pretty variable. I've actually seen quite a few of the striped ones, but it seems like if you actually look at the Enchi by itself, that every now and then you'll actually see a few of the tiger stripes here and there, but a lot of times it'll just kind of reduce the pattern like this. I actually pulled up another Enchi over here. Take a look at this one. Sometimes it's kind of hard to actually tell if you have an Enchi or not. And take a look at this one. This one is really close to the pattern that you would see in a normal ball python. I've actually produced some Enchis here in my collection that look really similar to a normal, and sometimes it's really hard to tell the difference between an Enchi and a normal. And usually the thing that gives it away as far as if you actually have an Enchi, a lot of times you can actually tell by, if you look at this stripe right along the face right here, it kind of comes right above the eye, and in the Enchis, in a lot of cases, it'll actually expand. Usually it'll expand, kind of have this little hump right on the top where the pattern comes up on the back of the head. That's a pretty sure indication that you actually have an Enchi, although I have seen some normals that are pretty close. I've seen some Enchis that really don't have that really exaggerated of a really big hump right there on the pattern on the back of the head, and I've seen some that are really obvious that have a really big extended pattern that comes up along the back of the head, which is kind of interesting. So if you actually look at the different colors of the Enchi, the colors can really vary from one Enchi to the other. And sometimes, like in this case, you'll get almost like an orange color. I've actually seen some that are really bright orange. Sometimes you can have almost like a gold color, like a goldish orange color on some of your Enchis. I actually pulled up another one over here. Take a look at this. Sometimes the Enchis can be almost as bright as some of your brightest pastels, which is pretty crazy. Look at how bright yellow this one is. it's pretty amazing. You can definitely tell on this one, it has a lot of the tiger striping and a lot of spacing in between the stripes. It almost looks like the KRG, the Calabash Reduction Gene, is kind of similar like this, where it'll have kind of the striping, but usually in the KRG it'll actually have these really big spaces between the striping, which is kind of interesting. So I pulled up one more Enchi as far as looking at just the color of the Enchi, and take a look at this. This one's kind of interesting because it doesn't really have the yellow or the orange in this version of the Enchi, and you can definitely tell it's an Enchi by the kind of the pattern right on the back of the head. It comes up a little bit here. As a matter of fact, if you just look at the pattern, it's pretty hard to tell on this one that it's actually an Enchi. And sometimes you can actually run into some problems as far as buying a combination with Enchi in the mix and not really knowing which version of the Enchi you have. So I actually just picked up recently, well, it's been a couple of years since I picked it up. I'm actually breeding them for the first time this year. I picked up a banana Enchi clown, has 3 genes in it, and the Enchi is kind of buried under the banana because the banana is so visually dominant. I don't really know if the banana or if the Enchi actually has some of the yellow color or the orange color associated with it. And it's even kind of hard to tell with the pattern because the combination of all those genes really reduces the pattern down to almost nothing on the back of the snake, especially with clown in the mix. So it'd be kind of interesting to actually breed that to something else. Say, for example, if I bred it to a normal and then isolated that version of the Enchi to figure out which version of Enchi I actually have. And knowing which version you have can be pretty powerful too. So for example, if you were to say, for example, you wanted to produce some silver colored snakes, like maybe you want to do like some silver bullets or some sterlings or something like that, what you could actually do is add Enchi to the mix to reduce the pattern. So if you actually use the Enchi with any of the colors in it, for example, if you actually use like the orange or the yellow version of the Enchi, potentially you could take your silver snake and turn it into kind of a coppery colored snake. And with a lot of those, a lot of times it'll have pastel and cinnamon together to produce the silver color snake. So you have to really be careful as far as which version of the cinnamon, which version of the pastel, and if you're using Enchi, which version of the Enchi to end up with the silver colored snake. So if you're actually going for something like that, I would probably use something that looks more like a normal colored Enchi without a lot of the yellow or the orange in it. And if you're going for something that's really bright and flashy, say for example, you're actually mixing together like the pastel, the yellow belly, the orange dreams, really super bright genes like that, and you wanted to add Enchi on top of it, probably what I would do is I'd use a version of Enchi that has a lot of the orange or the yellow in it to really enhance the brightness of a lot of your bright combinations. So knowing which version of Enchi that you actually have can be pretty powerful as far as what you plan to breed that snake to work Enchi into other combinations. So here is a super Enchi, and keep in mind that the Enchi is actually a co-dominant gene, so you can have 2 copies of the Enchi. And it's kind of interesting, it pretty much doubles the pattern reduction and doubles the effect of the color of the Enchi when you produce the super Enchi or super Enchi combinations. So take a look at this. This really reduces the pattern even more with 2 copies of the Enchi. As a matter of fact, I was looking over here on some of these super Enchis. I've seen some, I couldn't find them over here, but I saw one that just had just little tiny dots right on the back of the snake. Sometimes it'll reduce the pattern almost down to nothing, where you don't have hardly any pattern on the snake. And sometimes you want that and sometimes you don't, depending on your intended visual effect as far as the combination you're making. I pretty much like, you know, it really is, you know, kind of a, you know, some people like a lot of pattern, some people like a little bit of pattern. It's almost like painting a picture and using the genes to be an artist, and some people like a lot of color and pattern and some people don't. It really depends on the intended effect that when you mix all the genes together as far as what it ends up looking like. It's kind of interesting, and you can definitely tell in this one, this was actually one of the more yellow versions of the Enchi, and when you use 2 copies of the Enchi, it really brings out a lot more of the yellow color. So So take a look at this. I thought this was kind of interesting. Another super Enchi, and a lot of times the super Enchis will be really kind of jumbled up and reduced even more than one copy of the Enchi. Although I have seen some super Enchis that still have some tiger stripes, which is pretty interesting. And I found usually with a lot of these super Enchis, sometimes, but not in all cases, you'll actually have this almost this ring all the way around the head stamp. So you kind of have, you know, a little bit of extra pattern coming up the side with the Enchi. And when you have two copies of the Enchi, sometimes it'll break all the way across and have a pattern that circles the entire head. That's pretty much a sure sign that you have a super Enchi when you completely isolate the head stamp like that. So here's another one. I thought this was pretty interesting. This is another super Enchi, and look at how far the pattern is reduced, almost down to almost nothing with this super Enchi. As a matter of fact, my banana Enchi clown has a pattern that looks really similar to this, and sometimes it really depends on which genes that you're mixing with your Enchi or your super Enchi. Some genes will even reduce the pattern even more to where you hardly have any pattern on the top. This is a pretty amazing combination, and usually these Enchis and the super Enchis, they're not really that expensive. Take a look at this. This one actually sold in 2019 for just $140. You know, the Enchi's been around pretty much since the beginning. It's been around for a really long time, and the prices are pretty inexpensive if you're adding Enchi to your collection. So here's the last one I want to show you. This was really a breathtaking snake here. This is a super Enchi butter. And kind of the interesting thing about this, if you actually look at the combination of all these genes, the two copies of the Enchi and the butter, coming together to produce this breathtaking combination. It's pretty amazing as far as the pattern reduction and how all the genes are working together to really bring a lot of brightness and intensity to this snake. So I was actually looking over here on Morph Market for more super Enchi butters. Let me tell you, there are very few of them that actually look exactly like this. And most of them, I'd say, if you're actually looking at a certain combination with Enchi or super Enchi and you find another snake that looks almost exactly the same, I can almost guarantee it's probably from the same breeder, and it could possibly be from the same parents producing that Enchi or the super Enchi. And sometimes you actually find a snake like this, and even though there'll be a lot of other combinations that are almost identical over here on Morph Market, sometimes it's almost like a world's first that you're actually seeing these combinations come together in a unique way because the Enchi can be extremely variable. All right, so it is time for the question of the day. And Bory King James asks, which female can I get for cheap to breed with my normal male ball python to get some offspring that are different and beautiful? And that is a very good question. I'd say in most cases, most people would not recommend breeding a normal male because keep in mind you can actually take a male with a lot of genes and breed them to a lot of really inexpensive females to really spread out all those genes, and you kind of get more bang for your buck if you have most of the genes in the male versus in a female. But let me tell you, if you're just starting out in ball pythons and you have one male ball python that's a normal and you're thinking about breeding it for the very first time, you definitely can do it. And what I would actually do is I'd pick up a female that has as many co-dominant genes as you can possibly get in that ball python. As a matter of fact, you can actually go over to morphmarket.com, look at the snakes for sale, and sort by the most genes. And I've actually been over there searching around a little bit, and I saw some that were under $500 that had 6 genes, which is pretty amazing. A 6-gene female for under $500. And keep in mind, if you actually took that male and bred it to a 6-gene female, you'd actually get 64 different possibilities as far as all the combinations that you can get in your offspring. You get a whole rainbow of all these different offspring. And keep in mind, if you actually had like 6 eggs per clutch every single year, you could breed those ball pythons together for 10 years and never get the same snake twice, which is pretty incredible. You could pretty much breed that for the rest of your life and keep getting this whole rainbow of all these different combinations of genes, which would be pretty awesome. Another thing, keep in mind, you can actually, you can kind of switch it too. So another strategy would be to take that normal female, breed it to like a 6-gene female, and then hold back one of the males from the offspring that has multiple genes, like 5 or 6 genes, from your first breeding and then use that as a breeder and then keep your normal male as a pet. And that's kind of what I did with Bobby here around my neck. Bobby is my bamboo ball python, and I bred him through my collection. He just has one gene, just a bamboo, and I bred it through my collection and produced a whole bunch of bamboo combinations that I now use as breeders, and I keep Bobby pretty much just as a pet. He's not breeding anymore. He's just kind of hanging around my neck. As a matter of fact, he's in a really deep shed. I don't know if you noticed this. He's like in the deepest blue I've ever seen him. Take a look at his eyes. It's like super deep blue. I don't even know if he can see. As a matter of fact, I actually had him on my neck one time a couple months ago, and he started shedding right on my neck, which was kind of crazy. But that's kind of the strategy I'd use if you have a normal and you're thinking about breeding for the very first time. I'd definitely get a female, preferably with co-dominant genes, so you could actually see the results instantly on your first breeding. So that is pretty much it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.